We're very fortunate to be joined by Magnus Falk, who is a tech leader and advisor. Magnus, welcome.
Thank you very much indeed for having me.
It's lovely to have you here. You've had such a varied career across banking and government work. How did it all start?
It all started very differently from tech. I was a mining engineer by training. My grandfather was a mining engineer, and
Wow.
I made a promise before he died to become a mining engineer, and I was kind of stuck with that for a few years and did mining engineering, which was a very technology-heavy degree. You have to work out how to get 10,000 men, 10,000 foot underground and get 10,000 tons out of the same hole in the ground. And there are rock mechanics, there's logistics, there's electrical engineering, mechanical engineering. So it was a very good training, but then I decided, actually, to be honest, I found that mining was far from the centres where I wanted to be, and so I needed to find something to bring me back to places I wanted to live. And I joined the British Army, and I did that for a few years just to get that out of my system, and then joined Accenture, who I found that the combination of being able to run teams or lead people and take responsibility and the technology worked really well in that era of building applications as a consultant.
That's interesting in terms of creating systems. So thinking of it in human terms, creating systems for people, teams, and thinking of that categorization with technology that's required and those processes. Fascinating. So I know you've worked with government and I know you've worked in banking. How have those environments differed and what different skills have you used in those different settings?
Yeah, so having done consulting for about 10 years, I ended up joining a client, which was Credit Suisse, and stayed there for nearly 20 years. You know, you really grow up quite a lot in 20 years, and you think you know that technology works in a particular way because of the environment that you are in. Banking technology is quite different from government technology, in that you have much more central command and control in a bank. You try and do things once. Whereas in government, you find there are 400 CIOs, you know, across the environment, all trying to do the same thing and getting different funding streams, and so they're all repeating the same thing. So the government digital service, we tried to work out ways to develop central services that made CIOs' lives easier. The last thing you want to do is force something on them, but if they choose to use it because it's the easiest way of doing it, then you've helped them and help the objective.
Yes, it's very interesting when technology becomes intuitive, isn't it? You know that a platform really works when you know how to use it instantly because it's so intuitive.
Yeah, and I think when you're thinking about CIOs and kind of running big tech, those platforms are not necessarily the consumer type platforms that people might immediately think about. They're like operating a data center. So do I need to operate my own data center, or can I just buy a rack in a data center that's already operated to the standards that I need because it's on a government framework, for example?
Right, okay. I'm just wondering in the back of my mind how your army training has influenced all of this. You've talked a lot about leadership and you've mentioned control several times. How do you think the army helped you?
I think the British Army is a fascinating institution in that it trains you a lot, but then it doesn't oversee you too much. You're given a lot of latitude in a high trust environment, and so I think that's very good in a technology sense because that's what you want from your people. You want them to deliver outcomes and you want them to be driven by those outcomes, but you don't really want to control them too much. Yes, you need a few standards, you need to be able to point paths. So I think there is much that's similar about the kind of army structures and running a kind of technology organisation, although they're two very, very separate things.
I can see they'd be incredibly different. I'm wondering how many changes you've seen in the leadership environment over the past, say, 10 years.
Well, technology leadership has had to really grow up, in that 30 years ago, technology was seen as kind of a marginal part of running a business. And it wasn't until probably 15 years ago that I had my first CEO tell me that actually I think we're a technology company with a financial services license. And I think he was right, because by that stage the bank had been virtually impossible to operate without technology running. And we had to go to paper, everything would have stopped because there weren't the paper processes to operate anymore. You can't make a money transfer across your multiple countries with pen and paper these days. I think that technology leadership has had to grow up with that increasing importance. Firstly, there's the scale. In some organisations, technology can be 20-25% of the workforce. There are many businesses that are technology businesses in themselves today. And I think that means that people who are leading in the technology sphere you now have to, yes, be aware of the technology, but suddenly they now need to set vision, set strategy. What are the steps towards that strategy? They need to care about, are we inspiring the people? Are we getting the right people in to do this job? And of course, all the other parts of leadership that make it such a challenging thing, like how do we go to net zero?
Absolutely. How would you answer that question? Do you have any answers to that?
Well, net zero is a really difficult thing. I mean, there are certainly important ways that you can get power that mean that running technology, which you can't run technology without power, you can do it in much more effective ways. So if you're consuming hydropower or you're putting your major consumptive elements close to sources of readily consumable, renewable power, then that's a very good thing to do. So there are things you can do. Also, you can use technology to stop people travelling. Zoom is a great example of that, where we've had a massive footprint on people travelling around the world. I think actually it was the pandemic that did that, but Zoom enabled them to carry on their lives. So there are things that you can do, but it's tough. It becomes yet another important objective in the strategy that you've laid out.
And working during the pandemic with Zoom, which has been fundamental, as you say, to so many people's experience and quality of life, have you touched on these discussions around sustainability and net zero with Zoom?
Well, absolutely. I mean, our clients want to use Zoom to help achieve net zero in their businesses, and Zoom, of course, is trying to achieve net zero in its own business, and it's going to be making a sustainability statement this year.
Oh, fantastic. That's really exciting.
It is exciting, actually, because it's something we all have to do together.
And I think these larger companies become role models to smaller companies and SMEs. Fascinating. So obviously you've enjoyed some of the conference today at Tech Show London. What conversations sort of piqued your interest? Was there anything that particularly springboarded ideas for you?
Well, I have to say I've just arrived, so I haven't.
What are you planning to see? Let's say that. Well,
I'm doing a keynote today, and I'm planning to talk a bit about the workplace of the future and how technology really isn't the problem. We've seen how adaptable people are, and now we're starting to work in a flexible way with people having choice to be at home or in the office, what that actually means to people who are running businesses and how they should adapt their technology in their workplaces and their culture to make that successful. So I'm going to talk about that, and I hope there are a lot of people who come up afterwards and say, oh, I've got a question, or can you help with this? I'm
sure there will be. Are you planning to talk to any individuals on the keynote stage or the main stage today?
Well, I'm talking on the keynote stage, so I'll be on my own, but I hope afterwards I won't.
So obviously we're discussing many issues today on the different stages. Security and privacy, big data. Data and healthcare. Is there anything that's slightly outside of your area of expertise that you're intrigued by, that you'd like to know more about?
Well, I've definitely been quite interested in how AI is developing, and I see Sana, who leads AI development or policy for UK government, is here, so I look to catch up with her, having worked with her at the Government Digital Service, because I think there's something about how helpful that is going to be, but how important it is to get the ethics right. And I've not looked at it for a couple of years now, so I'd be interested to see how far that debate has gone.
Great. Well, I hope you managed to connect with those people and explore those themes. Magnus, thank you very much for joining Techerati today. Thank you.
It's really nice to be here. Thank you very much.